Okay, let's go ahead and keep talking about the different eras of the Earth's history. Again, remember, Paleozoic came after the Precambrian. Precambrian is our first era, so pre is first, Paleo is second. And during the Paleozoic, our window of time got smaller, but during that window, we see a huge diversity, or an increase in diversity in the marine world. And as that diversity increased, life also starts to evolve to land-based existence. But what I do want to point out, the two big yellow, whatever, they're not stars, whatever that shape is, those represent two mass extinctions. So the Earth experienced two mass extinctions during the Paleozoic era. Now, mass extinction happens, you have a major climate shift, you have a major alteration to the Earth's environment and ecosystem in a short period of time, and lots of species can't adapt. If you can't adapt, you don't survive, you go extinct. Mass extinction usually is 75 to 90% of the diversity on Earth is gone, extinct. That's not just number of individuals, that is diversity. So they're gone. Now, with a mass extinction and you wipe out a bunch of different species, it gives opportunity to those species that are still alive, that had the adaptable traits, that were fit and strong enough to survive the mass extinction, the shift in the temperatures, the climates, the whatever. Those species diversify rapidly and often speciate into all sorts of new environmental opportunities because there's no competition there. They're gone. The other species are gone, so now I can evolve and take over their, if you want to call it their ecological role or niche that they used to do, but with them being gone, I don't have as much competition. It's easier to evolve after a mass extinction for these species that survived the mass extinction. So the Paleozoic saw two of these, and that helped lead to such a rapid increase in diversity during the Paleozoic. So in the oceans, life is diversifying and evolving, and in the oceans we see jawless fish appear. We still have those. Some of those jawless fish are still alive today. But these were scavengers, just kind of sucking up nutrients, decayed material, whatever they could get a hold of. And that's what the hagfish and the lamprey still do today. They act as scavengers or parasites. Back when you're the first one, that's a good structure to have, that ability to kind of suck nutrients with your tubular mouth structure. Gave you an advantage over everybody else. So when you're the first, doesn't matter if it's not perfect, it works. Now as life is evolving to land, we see basic, simple, primitive plants start evolving to land. They evolved from the algae that was in the aquatic systems. So we get land-based plants starting to show up. These are non-vascular plants. Mosses and bryophytes that we still have today trace their origin back to this time period. So they're small. They're fairly flat. They don't grow really big. But you know what? There's really not much else on land, so you're doing better than anybody else on land as a non-vascular plant. But competition happens. Competition's occurring. Mass extinction happens during the Paleozoic here. And we see both the fish evolve into, we see jawed fish make their appearance. So now you can bite down, you can crush, you can rip, you can tear. You're going to be a better competitor than those things that just suck up decaying, rotting material. On land with the plants, well, if I can be vascular, meaning I can conduct nutrients throughout my body, I'm going to grow taller. I'm going to be taller, which means I can get more sunlight, which means I can outcompete those small, flat, low-lying plants. It's all about competition when we look at evolution. The strongest, fittest, most adaptable are the ones that keep surviving and adapting and evolving. So we get the seedless plants on land, jawed fish in the ocean. If we go into the ocean, we can find that the ancestor of modern sharks, let me move that up. The ancestor of modern sharks appeared in the oceans about 450 million years ago. Now the ancestor was a bit bigger, a lot bigger. Here's the fossil tooth of a primitive shark. So that's a person's hand holding that tooth. There's a jaw, person standing there relative to the size of the jaw of these early primitive sharks, the things we call megalodon. They existed. They used to live on Earth in the oceans back during the Paleozoic. Now, if megalodon was alive today, there is the ratio of megalodon to a modern person. They would just swallow up a surfer without any problem. Massive, much bigger than any great white shark we see on Earth today. So this ancestor was alive. It was competing, but then it went extinct. Because think about ecologically, how much food does that fish need? How many of those do we have to have a breeding population to sustain numbers? Is it ecologically feasible that they're still out there? Not at all. But we know they existed because we have evidence of them in the fossil record. I mean, direct fossil evidence showing the window of time that these things were present on Earth. Now, when we go back to land, those vascular plants start diversifying and getting even bigger, and now we see forests. Now, these are not forests like we have today. There are no flowering plants at this time. Basic, simple, primitive plants, but they got tall. They got 60, 80, 100 feet tall, making an ecosystem on land. So you have the producer base now on land. This allows other animals, or allows animals to evolve to a land-based existence. So insects evolve into land-based existence. And we see the earliest seed plants evolving during the Paleozoic. So some of these are still present today. Now, these are not oak trees and maples and peach trees and things like that. These are simple seed plants, cycads, that produce seeds, but the seeds are not protected. So they're making their appearance during the Paleozoic. And the insects are on land, and now we see fish, because those jawed fish, there's a bunch of them out there, a lot of diversity. The jawed fish start to evolve into primitive, simple, basic amphibians. So what I want you to think about, this lobe-finned fish here, look at its legs, and that's what they had. They had these leg-like structures. How big of a change is it to evolve those bones into the earliest amphibians? Build a little more support for your legs, so now you can hold yourself up a little bit better in shallow water or moving on to land. Think about an early amphibian. You still need water to keep your skin moist because you're using your skin for oxygen, for respiration, as well as very, very basic, simple, primitive lungs. We're not seeing a giant leap to go from lobe-finned to early amphibian. And we see these early amphibians showing up on land back in the Paleozoic era. Now, the Paleozoic was cruising along fine until environmental changes, and boom, we now give rise to the Mesozoic era. The Mesozoic, third era. And if you look at the window of time, it's the shortest one so far. It's the shortest window of time. But during the Mesozoic era, the Earth experienced 3 mass extinctions. So, major environmental changes and shifts and upheavals, etc. So, because of these mass extinctions and environmental changes and things like that, we see the amphibians decline in diversity. And we see reptiles. The reptiles evolve and increase in diversity. So it's kind of a changing of the guard as we move into the Mesozoic. Obviously, we still have amphibians out there. They're still present, they're still doing their thing, but their diversity has decreased. They're not nearly as numerous, they're not nearly as big, and who knows where they're going to be in the near future with amphibian extinction issues. But reptiles show up and start to do really, really well during the Mesozoic. Again, the Earth's environment changed, and go from an amphibian to a reptile. You dry the skin out and you have scales. You're laying eggs that can survive away from water. You're increasing the strength of your legs, your shoulders, and your hips. That expands the size of your chest. So now those simple lungs in the amphibians can become more efficient and more effective in a reptile. So you're not making massive changes. You're not going from a bacterial cell to a reptile in one jump. You're going through thousands and millions of jumps and eventually getting to reptiles. But you have to go through the fish and the amphibians, and now you're to the reptiles. And the reptiles during the Mesozoic, they were loving life. They were doing great. Our plants on land are also doing great. And we see these cycads appear and diversify and grow and just start doing really, really well during this Mesozoic era. The environment kind of settled out, became this somewhat tropical environment for a big part of the land. So if you go back to the tectonic plates and you look at how the Earth was connected and the position of the land during the Mesozoic, a lot of land was in a tropical zone. So reptiles love tropical zones. They do really well in that type of environment. So what we see during our Mesozoic is that our dinosaurs show up. They evolve from the reptiles as a branch of the reptile group. The dinosaurs appear and they diversify. The Mesozoic is often named or nicknamed Age of the Dinosaurs. Within the Mesozoic is where you have the Jurassic period, the Cretaceous period, those periods that were within the era, the Mesozoic era. So Age of the Dinosaurs, they are doing fantastic. Dinosaurs fill every ecological role. There's carnivores, there's herbivores, there's omnivores, there's flying dinosaurs, dinosaurs in the ocean, all sorts of dinosaurs out there. Interestingly enough, T-Rex, we think of him as a big, giant, top-level predator. That is wrong. T-Rex was not a predator. He can't run down anything. He's too big. He can't hide and ambush things. He's too big. He can't sprint after anything. He can't grab anything with those little arms. That's embarrassing. But what T-Rex can do is smell stuff with that big giant nose. And it can smell dead, rotting carcasses from long distances. Go find them, scare off anything that's feeding on it, and scavenge. T-Rex is a scavenger. If you look at the skull of T-Rex and you look at the ratio of the brain and the nasal cavity and then you look at the eyes, that's pretty comparable to a turkey vulture. Those are those birds that circle overhead and just smell dead, rotting carcasses on the side of the road. So it's interesting. We keep learning more about dinosaurs by scientific studies, by research, by presenting a hypothesis and designing an experiment and testing, collecting data and supporting or rejecting. So if you guys ever have the opportunity, I highly encourage going to the Chicago Field Museum, and the dinosaur skeleton Sue is up there, the T-Rex. She's one of the most complete T-Rex skeletons in the world, right up there in Chicago. Check it out. It's an amazing thing to go and look at. And you're looking at the skeleton of an animal that was alive 100 million years ago. It's an impressive thing to be able to get right up to it and see it and take a look at it. Okay, so in our next lecture, we're going to keep talking about the Mesozoic